anybody, any place, and anywhere. I am not worried about this. I can show these numbers every week from Sunday. In fact, I was here a little bit early. Sonny, where you at? Sonny's in the back. We went down into Houston, and we found a precinct in downtown Houston that went 100% for Joe Biden in 2020. And it wasn't a small special precinct that had 6 or 8 people in it. It was 376 Biden votes, 0 Trump, 0 third party. Wow. 100%. I went in there because I want to put my numbers up against the toughest audiences. It's one thing to talk to a friendly audience, which I would be willing to bet most of you are. In fact, I can tell there won't be any mainstream media articles out there because I don't see anybody with a mask. So I went into this district, found the precinct that went 100% for Joe Biden, and I sat down, pulled my computer up, went through all the counties in Texas, 254 counties. Click, 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 click. Not one peep. Nobody had anything negative to say about what I was showing. Not one person could give me any point to rebut what I was saying, that Trump should have won Texas by a huge amount. And I folded up that computer after about 30 minutes because I was bored, and it was starting to rain. And I stood up and I left that cemetery. Sam Adams is probably my favorite American historical figure. He also had a good sense of humor in tough times. Sometimes people ask me if I'd like to run for office, and the answer has been, currently is, and almost certainly always will be no. Because I believe in the same things that he believed in, that it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate minority intent on setting brush fires of freedom in the hearts and minds of men. I feel like personally, having a conversation with my friend Zach over there, Zach was with me in Ole Miss Army ROTC. He knows all the stupid stories. But we had a lot of conversations about history growing up. And I feel like we've settled into a comfort zone, especially if we have a good career, a nice 401k, we've got softball practice on Wednesday with the men's group, and we don't want to butt heads over these controversial topics. We don't want to be seen as radicals. Samuel Adams had this to say about people who chose the comfort over the fight. He said, if you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animated contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. So there's doors there. You know, a lot of people don't have the appetite for this kind of stuff. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lift the hands which feed you. Those are the hands that are going to offer you $600 a month to shut down your family-owned business that you've had around for 100 years. That happened here in the last couple of years. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. So all these people you see that are just walking along, not wanting to get involved, not wanting to get their hands dirty, these are the people that he's talking to. My dad told me that 10% of the people lead the way, 90% are just along for the ride. And how true has that been in the last 2 years of your life? Yet the whole Republican Party in this state doesn't want to say a freaking word about what I'm going to talk about tonight with these elections. They don't want to push too hard about the mask mandates. They don't want to defend your freedom. They're worse when they're in power. They say the right things when they're out of power. Notice how the U.S. Congress Republicans, they want to build the wall down because they know they won't get it done because they don't have the votes. They don't like to lead. But I believe that you can view today as an animated contest of freedom rather than choosing a mindset of victimhood and go forward and help fix these issues. The first step for me is awareness. Because how many of you think the 2020 Electoral College is compromised with fraud? Okay, so just about everybody in the room believes that. The rest of you are rhinos. How many of you believed in 2020 that there was fraud in Texas? Oh, yeah. I mean, you've probably seen a lot of the work that's been out there. I put a lot of work out there. Some of the other groups have put it out there. There's a few candidates in here, Jameson, Ellis, that may know a thing or two about the tricks of the establishment party. But how many people thought truly that there might be fraud in Montgomery County? There's a few over here. So what I'm going to show you tonight may disturb you. I'm going to show you this methodology. I want you to be able to understand what it is I'm putting out there, because I want you to be able to go next door and have a conversation with somebody who's suffering through the Joe Biden administration. The economic woes, the inflation, the gas prices, the national embarrassment, the international disgrace that he's put on really over the world since he's in the highest office on all the earth. Slide, please. Slide. All right, polling. I don't care a whole lot about polling. I'll tell you this though, Greg Abbott has a pollster working for him right now. And that pollster comes to him every so often and says, Governor Abbott, my numbers suggest that you were clobbering Robert Francis O'Rourke in this state by 10 points. Because of the way I ask my questions, because of the way people respond, because of social desirability bias, and also just basic mathematical error, I've assigned a 3.5 point margin of error to my poll, meaning if you win by 13.5, I'm right. If you win by 6.5, I'm right. But is that 7 point window, is that precise? It's not precise. Polling is a tool. It's all it is, it's all it ever has been. When the media starts pushing polls out there, they are not doing it to inform. They are doing it to influence. I consider there to be two major reasons why the mainstream media pushes polling. Anybody want to blurt one out? Suppression. Suppression, I heard it in the back. A good example of a suppression poll would be late October of 2020, Washington Post, Joe Biden leads Wisconsin by 17 points. So let me break this down for you. Donald Trump is going to lose a state that he won for the first time in over 30 years for a Republican. He's going to lose it, and not only lose it, he's going to lose it by 17 points. Worse than Obama beat McCain by. So that's a suppression poll. Of course, the final result turned out to be 16.5 points off. In a realistic election in Wisconsin, it probably turned out to be 25 points off. That's deliberate. Nobody misses a poll by 17 points. The second reason is to justify final election outcomes. A really good example of that, how do you get 50% of the country to accept Joe Biden carrying Pennsylvania? I would bet my life savings that Donald Trump will carry Oregon or Hawaii before Joe Biden will even be competitive in Pennsylvania or Michigan in 2020. That's right. You put out a summer's worth of polling that shows Joe Biden carrying Pennsylvania by 9 points. So when the final result comes in, the media says, well, Trump closed the gap, just like he did last time, but this time it wasn't quite enough. It is all mind control. And in Texas, we've had this organization called Battleground Texas for a decade. And I remember when it came out and people laughed at it. People chuckled because even our urban areas were pretty conservative. You only had Austin, everybody made fun of that blueberry in the bowl of tomato soup. Now it's not so funny, is it? Because that blueberry has metastasized and it includes Williamson County and Hayes County. It has also started bleeding off into Bastrop County. It now connects thanks to Hayes County, a brief separation with Comal County, and has Bear County there. So Central Texas has become a tech hotbed, a festering cesspool of Democrat politics, because we laughed at Austin rather than making sure that they could never mount an offensive. Now, what matters in presidential polling? If you're listening, you know the answer. The polling doesn't matter. The polling is mind control. What matters is trends, indicators, bellwethers, and predictors, and a number of these have been credible for more than a century. For example, how many of you guys were alive in 1888? Now that's a long time ago. That is before the foundation of Major League Baseball. That is before the Spanish-American War. That's before we even had the lower 48 completely built out. 1888, it's a pretty good sample size, I would say. Now they say, well, we've had 3 months of polling. I've got 132 years worth of predictive information. A good example in 1888. Now none of y'all were alive then, we've already established that. But some of your male voting neighbors probably were. In 1888, President Grover Cleveland ran for re-election and gained votes from his first race in 1884 and lost to Benjamin Harrison, making Grover Cleveland the last incumbent president to gain votes from the previous election and lose re-election. Until Donald Trump gained 11 million votes in 2020 and somehow lost re-election. 11 million votes. In fact, there were 3 campaigns since 1888 that lost votes from the previous election and were re-elected, including Obama in 2012, which I will cover. Now, the things that matter are the trends, indicators, bellwethers, and predictors. And the beauty of election forecasting, in which I call 50 out of 50 correct in 2016, is that every state has its own details. You can't compare Texas to Oklahoma because they're a completely different election. We can't compare Texas to Vermont. We can't compare Texas to anything because Texas is its own thing. In fact, we have a big urban suburb. We are running out of rural ground here in Texas in which to blot out places like Houston or to blot out Austin or San Antonio. So we sit here with our comfortable margins. We've been red all over. In fact, Texas has never been blue in a presidential election as long as I've been alive, and I'm 37. So you'd have to be 46 years old right now to have ever lived through a presidential election in which Texas was blue. It's been a long time. So what's gone on in this state since 2004? I pick up the trends in 2004 because it was the first election of what I call the high turnout era. Both parties nationally gained more than 10 million votes from 2000. Now in 2004, Texas had George W. Bush running out of Texas. I would consider the 21-point victory here a little bit artificially inflated. Not a lot. I would say Texas is probably baseline Republicans plus 16 or so in 2004 because he's from here. And he performed well with the Hispanic working class. He beats John Kerry by 21 points. Red line Republican, blue line Democrat. You can see a huge gulf between the two candidates, more than 1.5 million votes separating the two. And then what happens? You have the second Bush term, aka the beginning of the end for the old school Republican Party. If you are being honest with yourself, I can say this here. I've heard some foul things in Dallas, some other places, but if you say it here, I'll probably be all right. But George W. Bush, if you're honest, was one of the worst incumbent presidents in the history of the United States to ever be reelected. Yep. So what happened in his second term? We had two wars that had begun under Bush's presidency that had no end in sight. I have a Vietnam veteran here on the end that I was able to speak with, and my dad served 3 tours there. They would sympathize with that as well. No strategic goals to win. We had the birth and development of a surveillance state in your life with the signing of the Patriot Act. The Department of Homeland Security came up under Bush, which would consider every one of you a domestic terrorist for even listening to a conversation like this. You have the TSA, which makes every trip to the airport miserable. You had a financial collapse and a housing collapse, the economic tailspin at the end of his second term. A president who was a human punching bag who crawled out of the White House on his hands and knees with a 25% approval rate. Combine that with a natural 8-year pendulum shift away from the party that's in the White House, and the emergence of a very popular and charismatic minority candidate with a very short political track record, and nationally the election is going to swing 10 points from Republican +3 to Democrat +7, which even hit Texas. And here's your shift in Texas. Because Texas is so strong at the Republican Party loyalty, in 2008, you can see McCain still wins the state, but he actually loses votes from Bush's total of 08, while Obama gains 675,000. So write that 675 down as a reference point. 675,000 new Obama votes. That's your soft middle. That's the kind of thing that turns Bell County from Bush +31 to McCain +9. You even have a trend here. And then you have the loss of McCain votes. So 675 for Obama. Now we have this. We have Romney comes in, and Romney gains 90,000 votes. Everybody thought that Romney did some great thing here in Texas because he won it by 17 points. There was a big trend Republican. So even though Obama was reelected, people in Texas breathed a sigh of relief because when Texas is Republican +17, it will never flip. Was that because of Romney? Or was it because the Democrats tanked? It's because Obama lost 220,000 votes in Texas in the re-election. So we have a net swing of over 300,000 votes. It makes it look good for the GOP. And then we have 2016. 2016 in Texas, I would call it unique. Donald Trump, New York businessman, with a Ted Cruz grudge in Texas. Be honest, how many of y'all were upset with the Trump and Ted Cruz grudge in Texas in 2016? Some of y'all are not telling me the truth. But I remember not too many conservative credentials at the time. So what you have is stagnant growth again. You have Trump only gains 100,000 votes in the state. We have 2 consecutive Republican cycles in which about 100,000 votes were gained. 100,000 votes. Hillary Clinton is up over 500,000 votes. Net from Obama 08, it's only about 300,000. Closing the gap to 9 points. The good news for you, if you're a Trump person, is that you had all those issues working against him in 2016. With conservative credentials now and some good accomplishments, a good economy, you'd expect better performance. So if I'm a Trump person, maybe for the first time, he could hit 5 million votes for a Republican. I would call that good. Slide. And there's Trump 2020. Trump not only hit 5 million votes, he went almost all the way to 6 million. He's just shy of 6 million votes, a gain of 1.2 million Republican votes in one election cycle. Who is that? Well, that's all the people that voted for him in 2016. That's your neighbor down the street who voted for Evan McMullen because he believed all that garbage about Trump. That is your Democrat voting Hispanic working class who's never voted for a Republican in his life. Trump was well over 45% with the Hispanic vote overall. You can look in the precincts in Houston, in which there's heavy black population. You have a several-point trend in favor of the GOP. Bigger minority support, and of course we'll say that the white suburban vote is weak. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I would be hard-pressed to find much growth going on in the Democrat column, if I'm being honest with myself, with Trump having 1.2 million new votes. Slide. But there's Joe Biden with 1.4 million new votes. Twice the size of Obama's gain. In the same year, Trump gained a Republican record that not even George W. Bush could think about touching. Does that sound right to anybody? No. 2.6 million new votes between the 2 major party candidates in one election? No. All right. So what the result is Joe Biden has 600,000 more votes than Trump won the state with in 2016. With the average Republican gain for the last 2 cycles being about 100,000 votes. To me, it looks like Joe Biden was supposed to win Texas by 500,000 votes. So imagine the election integrity movement with a blue Texas on the map. How hard would it be for anybody to go up into Wisconsin or Pennsylvania and shout about electile dysfunction when you have this going on in Texas? Slide. So the county map of Texas, this is my rating system. If it's in green, it doesn't mean there's no fraud. It means that your politician, your county commissioners are going to be very hard-pressed to mount a public challenge towards any election data just based on statistics alone. What did I tell you? 88% of the vote in Texas is urban and suburban. So that's really not a whole lot of folks that are in the green. The red counties, like Montgomery and Harris that we're going to discuss tonight, are highly statistically disparate. And I'll tell you exactly what that means when we get to the counties. Slide. What would it take to have a blue Texas? A lot of people don't really know what that is, but it's not a whole lot different than the map looks like today. Those are the 4 counties, Harris, Dallas, Travis, and Bear, blown up to huge Democrat margins like we've been seeing in the last 2 cycles. And then the Republican strongholds like Collin, Denton, Montgomery, shaved down to where you don't have such large Republican wins that blot out the Democrat strongholds in the urban centers. Now, what do we see here? Look at Tarrant County, which is the second set of bars. The red bars are Republican gains as a percentage from the previous election. You can see in Tarrant County, the Republicans have lost votes 3 consecutive elections in a row in Tarrant County, but always have won Tarrant County. And then Trump gains a record 64,000 votes in Tarrant County to lose it for the first time since 1964. We have a gain of 26% in Collin County, dwarfing any previous Republican gains, only to win the county by 4 points in 2020. We have a gain in Denton County of 30% for Trump, only to win the county by 8 points. The narrative that your moderate tax cut white suburban Republican voted against Trump and voted for Biden is complete garbage based on the magnitude of Trump's gains in these counties being of historic levels. Slide. Let's talk about Harris County. Is anybody here from Harris County? Anybody come over? Got a couple? All right, Harris County used to have a reputation of being a big city county that was all Republican. And then within the last 2 decades, well, that has definitely gone out the window. In my scale, I call Harris County competitive, the yellow box over there. I classify every county in my system. The competitive category means it was a Trump loss in 2016, but with at least 30% of the vote. Those are your Miami-Dades, your Harris counties, these ones that have a lot of minority working class, in which you can flip those, you have a competitive county in 2020. And then the census data, that matters to me as well. I need to know what the population is doing, whether it's surging, whether it's trickling, or whether it's actually decreasing. Because in places like Pennsylvania, that changes the ballgame entirely. Harris County's population is over 4.7 million, according to the latest census, and that is up over 600,000 since 2010. I will caution you, the census is absolutely short-shotted Republican states. Make sure their populations are as low as possible. Why? So you don't get as many electors at the presidential level and as many Republican congressmen for your state legislature to dissect. Same thing happened in Arizona. We somehow have 1 million new two-party votes in Arizona, but not one new elector on the new map. But Colorado got one. Go figure that. The corruption is a lot deeper than you think it is. Harris County, slide. In 2004, this is the last year that the Republican Party won Harris County at the presidential level. George W. Bush, of course, running out of Texas, wins it by 10 points. The margin between Bush and Kerry is 109,000 votes. And then we're going to have the second Bush term and all the issues that came with it, with Obama coming up. Slide, and here's your flip in 2008. McCain takes it on the chin, loses 13,000 votes, and it's Obama who captures that. No, go back, don't get ahead of me. Back one. Who's advancing the slides? Okay, who's got the slides up? Okay. McCain is the one dropping votes. Obama's got a gain of 115,000. There were 22,000 net new registered voters between 2004 and 2008. That is your Obama surge, and you're going to want to pay attention to that. Now, in 2012, slide, you're going to see the trend move back to the right. Romney only loses the county by 1,000 votes. But Romney doesn't have much of a gain. Romney's a very poor fit for the working class, also a poor fit specifically here with the Hispanic voter in Texas. Obama is down a few thousand. 40,000 net new voter registration. So the county in 2012 is a competitive county. I am perfectly happy as a conservative with that result being neutral in Harris County. They have no margin. Now for Trump 2016, slide. Trump is the one that gets smashed in Harris County in 2016. Drops almost 40,000 votes. That is your suburban moderate sitting out and voting in third party. You can see it in the numbers. And there's Hillary Clinton with a gain of 121,000. Her gain is almost identical to Obama's gain in 2008. You see these statistics are pretty predictable. What is very concerning to me is that number of net new voter registrations, which is 235,000 in 4 years. Starting in Obama's second term, the Democrats in Harris County learned how to load the voter rolls with artificial voters. That is a number that is almost 6 times higher than what came on in the previous election cycle. Now, if I'm Team Trump in 2020, we just lost Harris County by 12 points. In the political rating system, a 10-plus point win is called safe. Safe Democrat, 12 points. Team Trump needs to reverse the decline. I think that if Trump can get back to the Romney level and then some, maybe a good goal for Trump in Harris County would be 600,000 votes. You're going to lose the county in 2020, but if you get 600,000, you can cut your losses pretty good. 600,000, slide. How about 700,000? He's up 155,000 votes. Well over where Romney was in 2012. That is only possible based on where the demographics have shifted in these counties by flipping tons and tons, tens of thousands of minority working class voters. The Democrat column. Of course, now we have almost 250,000 net new voter registrations since the last cycle. That is the problem. More mail-in balloting, drive-through voting. The Democrats have been picking up 115, 120,000. If you average that out, you've got a gain of 230,000 plus. Biden's going to look like he's around 780,000 if he's got an average Democrat vote gain. Slide. Or 918,000. That's about 130,000 over what their average gains are. That's 110,000 over what their record gains are in Harris County. Slide. So Biden's winning margin is 13.3. My forecast has it at 785,000, which is still affording a gain of almost 80,000 votes, with the Trump gain on the other side. Slide. All right, there's your precinct map of Harris County. Most of the clean trends you find in the urban center. Most of the distortion in the data is in these suburban areas, especially in the Northwest. They're in Cypress. You can see it in Kingwood. You can see it out in Katy. Lots of hidden votes in those strongholds. Lots of Trump trend in the center, especially in the eastern side of core Houston. Slide. Your certified results in Harris County. Your likely results in Harris County. Slide. Biden plus 5.5. All right, slide. Montgomery County. The classification is Republican. One by Romney, one by Trump. Trump had a smaller margin. I account for that. These are counties that could be trending away from the GOP. We have different counties that Trump won that I call crimson, meaning they're bigger margin wins than Romney. All the population completely on board with America First. The population here, up 165,000 since the last census. That matters. So I'm going to look at the forecast, and I'm going to expect both parties to be gaining votes due to sheer population gain. 620,000 total population. Slide. In 2004, Bush, 57-point margin of victory. Slide, and here's your Obama trend. Obama's going to pick up 8,000. McCain's going to beat him 2-1 in new votes, but it's going to trend the county slightly to the left by about 4 points. Then we have Romney, Obama. Slide. Romney's going to win by almost 61 points. Obama drops 4,000 votes. Romney's got a gain of 18,000. Trump 2016. Slide. Clinton gains 13. Trump gains 13. Margin of victory is 51 points. So consistently, the Republicans are plus 50 here in Montgomery County. I would say that it's not reasonable for a 60-point victory to be happening here based on population size at this point. But look at the Republican gains. 15, 12, 13. They're averaging a gain of about 15,000 per cycle based on population gain alone. That would put Trump at 165,000 ballpark in 2020. I would go for 165,000 for Trump. Slide. Slide. 165,000, huh? How about 194,000? That is almost 30,000 over what has been coming up for the Republicans in 3 cycles. The Democrats, even if we have the highest gain we've ever had, 13,000, that's going to put Joe Biden at 59,000 votes. Slide. That's a gain of almost 30,000 Biden votes. In the same cycle, Trump put up a record Republican number. All right, can you go back one, please? Look at the voter registration numbers in the middle. We have 29,000, 21,000, and then all of a sudden we start registering 50+ thousand per cycle. Those folks receive mail-in ballots. Harvesters grab the mail-in ballots and mail them in. If there have been any exceptions made for drop boxes, locals. You want me to answer that? For those of you who are locals, you need to check and see if anybody made exceptions, emergency year, for drop boxes, because they're not supposed to be allowed here, but neither is drive-through voting, which Houston did. Now, look at the voter numbers. I've got Biden slide, and Biden's 15,000, 16,000 over that number. Slide. Trump won by 44 points. Had Biden come in at the 59,000, Trump would have won by 52.5. Bigger than he did in the last election. Slide. Now the precinct map. Let me show you, just so you don't think I'm crazy. Now, I did not pick the Woodlands. I'm not looking down at the Woodlands in the populated, congested areas. I picked precinct number 23, Willis, right up there in the very top of the county. Is anybody from that area? I'm sure it was probably loaded with Biden boat parades and car parades. I know there's a lot of oil tool shops up there, Biden, key demographic for Biden. Slide. Precinct 23. I'm going to show you what is going on up here. It's a crimson precinct, meaning it was won by Romney and then it was won by Trump in 2016, but by a bigger margin. So if Trump 1.0 is winning things bigger than Romney did, you can bet your bottom dollar Trump 2.0 is coming out for blood. So Romney won this precinct by almost 400 votes in 2012. Slide. And here's the shift in 2016. Trump's got a gain of 360 plus votes. The Democrats are going to gain 30. So the trend is 12 points more Republican than it was in 2012. So if I'm Team Trump and I can make that gain happen again, Trump is going to finish around 1,400 votes in 2020. Slide. There's 1620. Trump 2.0 was much stronger than Trump 1.0. If the Democrats put up the same gain, then they're going to be still under 400 votes. Slide. 676. So Willis, Texas, with record Republican growth and a 12-point Republican trend in 2016, throws out 315 new Democrat votes in one cycle in a 75% Republican precinct, trending at 7 points to the left. Does that look normal to anybody? Now multiply that. How many precincts do we have in Montgomery County? Multiply that number of times the ones that I didn't get into. In fact, it's very hard for me to dice the precincts in Montgomery County because a lot of them are being redrawn in the more populated areas. This is one I picked specifically because I could tell it was the same precinct. Slide. So your certified total in Montgomery County looks like that, 71 to 27. Adjusted for 59,000 Biden votes, slide, 75-23. So there's 16,000 votes there. My estimate last year was that Biden has 675,000 fraudulent votes in Texas, which would put Trump in the mid-double digits as a percentage winning the state. Slide. Now, what do we do about this issue? There are 10 points for fixing the true pandemic. Slide. And this is my goal. Slide. The first point is to clean out the voter rolls. This is the fundamental element of having a clean election because the foundation of a fraudulent election is in the rolls. The foundation of a clean election is in the rolls. Now, who should be eligible to vote? Who should be registered to vote? Citizens, alive, 18 plus, eligible. Hey, when I become president, it's going to be 40 plus. The foundation of a clean election is found in the roll. Now, why do I say that? Because I'm going to show you information from Wisconsin that's really going to make you upset. You're welcome to come over here and take a photo because it's granular. Slide. The Gableman investigation in Wisconsin has given us a ton of good information about the quality or lack thereof of our voter rolls. Now, yeah, you can come right on up. This is Madison, Wisconsin, Dane County. There are 2 counties in the state that the Democrats have to blow out in order to compete in Wisconsin, given the pro-Trump shift in the rest of the state. Dane is one of them. The apartment in the top left, it has 20 units and 312 registered voters. That is 16 registered voters per unit in this apartment complex. This one here has 23 registered voters per unit. This has been found out through the Gableman investigation and canvassers. The Secretary of State internal audit of the Wisconsin voter roll shows voters registered as apostrophes and exclamation points and other marks of punctuation, registered en masse in 1918, still receiving mail ballots and sure as hell still voting. This is a state decided by 20,600 votes at 3:45 in the morning on November the 4th. This is an assisted living center. It has a 2-to-1. Sheriff Schmaley from Racine County is one of only 2 sheriffs I know that have gone hardcore on election fraud because he found fraud coming out of the nursing homes. He made it an issue, asked the DA to press charges, and turned it into a huge issue for the Wisconsin Elections Commission. This state, they estimate that 7% of all mail ballots were trafficked by mules. And if you haven't seen 2,000 Mules, you need to go watch it. I have a confession to make. I knew about all the data from 2,000 Mules. I reviewed some of it offline, but I'd never seen it until last week. And it corroborated all of my findings for a year and a half, why there's just too many votes for this one guy. The voter roll is where it all starts, and the way you find out the fraudulent registrations is through canvassing. So any election you've had, it doesn't have to be the 2020 election, it can be any recent election. You need a cast vote record from your county elections office. So somebody in the Republican primaries, who voted? Did they vote by mail? Did they vote in person? Did they vote earlier on election day? That's what it'll have on it, what address they live at. And when you find the mail ballots and you go to these apartments, find the colleges, find the nursing homes, and you're going to find registrations that have never been cleaned out. And you also need to watch the 2,000 Mules to understand how people are accessing these rolls and identifying who's going to be having a ballot sent out but will not be able to retrieve that ballot. Slide. Number 2, ban all electronic elections equipment.
Yeah.
Slide, please. Now, I'm talking about ballot marking devices, scanners, tabulators, electronic poll books. There are a lot of issues, and I'm not specific about vendor. It doesn't matter the vendor. Anything that can be connected to the internet can be hacked and intercepted. 3 good studies for you. Number 1, Antrim County, Michigan, ANTRIN. That is the work of Matt DeParno and his team immediately after November 3rd. That is a county that is a 2-to-1 Trump county that went blue on election night, surrounded by a ton of other Trump counties. It would have been like the Texas Panhandle going blue on election night, where everybody was like, that's not a normal result. Well, the county clerk up there was forced to fall in the sewer, but they found through their investigation the capabilities of these tabulators and software applications to alter and manipulate vote totals. You also have Mason County, Colorado. That's the work of the Lindell team, Jeff O'Donnell, the Lone Raccoon in Mason County, and then Otero County, New Mexico, David Clements and team found that machines can be used to hack into electronic voter rolls and turn out voters remotely, or should I say registrations belonging to fictitious entries, and turn them out remotely. Machines. The biggest tell that there's an issue with machines is the behavior of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors in Arizona. Subpoenaed by the state legislature to turn over large routers and other electronic equipment and refused, with the eyes of the political world on them for 10 months, with supposedly the cleanest election in history having just been conducted. I can't think of a better way to own my political opponents than to turn over all that equipment and have us look stupid. And they didn't do it. Slide. Number 3, voter ID with paper ballots only. Well, you may be thinking to yourself, well, we've got voter ID here in Texas. I guarantee you, if you go to a precinct in Willis or in Montgomery, they're going to look at your ID 6 ways from Sunday. You go down to vote in the middle of Houston or in Dallas or in Austin, it's a third world election. We have a number of conservative states still out there that don't have voter ID. North Carolina is trying to have it, but it continues to be held up in courts. Nebraska doesn't have it. I'll make it simple. If anybody wants to withhold ID from an election, they intend to defraud an election. Go down to the inner city and ask a high minority population if they have IDs, and you'll be fortunate to come out with all of your teeth. Donald Trump was famous for ridiculing his opponents. That's Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, number 5, ridicule. And of course, the number of pearl clutchers sit there and they say, well, that's not who we are. I can't believe that he would say that about this person that wants to kill me and destroy my future. But he was smart because he knew what he was doing, and I think that it's time that we ridicule our opponents on this one, because there's nothing really more racist than insinuating an entire group of people based on skin color or race are too stupid to get an ID. Simple issue. Slide. Number 4, ban mail-in voting. I have an asterisk because I am hard but I am fair. That asterisk is for overseas military and the legitimately disabled with a notary that they can vote by mail. We'll figure out a system. Did anybody see about 2 weeks ago the patriot in Wisconsin named Harry Waite who found out online that he could request anybody's mail-in ballot just if he knew their date of birth and didn't even have to have an identification requirement to get the ballot. Well, of course, what he did was he went on there and he requested Robin Voss's mail-in ballot, who's the Speaker of the Wisconsin General Assembly, who hasn't lifted a finger to fix the elections issue. Mail-in voting. Who knows where those ballots even go? Slide. Obviously, they can go anywhere. So Jimmy Carter is your conspiracy theorist. And like I said, I've not found any mainstream media in the building. But sometimes I get hit with claims of being a conspiracy theorist. I always say that Jimmy Carter is my role model as a conspiracy theorist. And I mean the same Jimmy Carter who's the only person happy that Joe Biden is in the White House today. Jimmy Carter was part of a bipartisan panel 15 years ago that said that mail-in voting is a one-way ticket to a fraudulent election. In Wisconsin, 7% of mail ballots were trafficked by mules. In Nevada, a state decided by less than 34,000 votes, they mailed mail-in ballots to the entire voter roll. Texas did an internal audit of its own voter rolls released on New Year's Day. How about that? And what bad news is dropped on New Year's Day? Get it out. 450,000 duplicate registrations in Texas. Some of those are illegal aliens, but a lot of them are people that have, like women with a maiden name and a married name, or they've been divorced and have another name. You have a lot of those. You have 450,000 total duplicate registrations in this state that are able to receive or have mail ballots applied for. In Florida, same thing. People can apply for mail-in ballots without the actual person that should be getting the ballot requesting the ballot. The mail-in system has to go. We have to put in a number of steps that we can get to make this something that the general public can swallow, because once you give people something, it's hard to take it away. Notice there's a lot more states trying to go to all mail-in ballots because they know they cannot win legitimate elections where people show up and vote in person. Slide. Number 5, ban early voting. This one's a tough one in Texas because it's a religion here. This is where it started. In 1917, Texas began putting laws on the books regarding early voting. It was restricted at the time to people who legitimately could not turn out and vote on election day. So the asterisk here is for those doctors, nurses, pilots, election workers that cannot turn out on election day. We can figure out a very short window of time where people with a legitimate reason can cast a ballot in person. But the early voting, this state, by 1987, 70 years after the first law started hitting the books, opened it up to everybody to come vote early. So we have it, it's just like vote early. It's like, well, why do we even have this thing in the Constitution called election day? We've turned it into not only election weeks, but more than election month. In Virginia and in Minnesota, they start voting for president in September by mail. Not even time for an October surprise, which is why you see all the Google trends, how do I change my vote in this state? So in Texas, our governor decided in response to the COVID issue that he would grant a third week of early voting in 2020. And instead of 2, in case 2 weeks of voting every hour of every day for 2 weeks wasn't enough, we needed to have a third week. So much so that we had 91% of our total vote was cast before election day. 91%. So here's how the Democrats kindly responded to Governor Abbott's third week of early voting. Slide. Drive-through voting lanes. That is our neighbors to the south in Harris County, where Donald Trump added more than 150,000 votes to his previous total, only to lose the county worse as a percentage and the total votes than he did by in the previous election. This happened in Bexar County. This happened in South Texas as well. Drive-through voting. So it's too dangerous for me to get out and vote. So here's 6 IDs, you give me 6 ballots, and I'll return them to you. Remember, down at the precinct level, some of y'all, and I had somebody back in the back tell me, hey, everybody that you marked red in Montgomery County, they said they were going to clean the election. Well, not everybody's upright. Early voting has to go. We need to return to what the Constitution says, voting on election day. Slide. Number 6, drastically smaller precincts. Extremely important. Slide, and here's why. In Maricopa County, there were 744 voting precincts. A number of those had more than 7,000 ballots cast. With turnout percentages in the 70s, that means 9,000 to 10,000 registered voters per precinct. So those of you who work precinct level elections should know that any voter roll with 9 or 10,000 voters on it in a precinct is impossible to manage, know who's going to move in or out of the precinct, know who's died, know who's registered more than once. So if you lose 2% of the 10,000 person voter roll administratively, then what does that mean? You've got a couple hundred entries that can be had fraudulently with mail-in ballots or electronically, let alone if you have 10 or 20% like some of these in Maricopa County do. It's impossible to monitor your rolls. It's impossible to conduct several weeks of elections activities easily. And it's also hard on the back end with the time constraints to do any QA/QC on the election results and county accuracy. Smaller precincts, 1,200 registered voters or fewer, according to the Arizona Independent Canvass, is where we need to get with that. But what is the takeaway? We need 5 to 6 times more people working elections than we already don't have. We have to have people involved at the precinct level, am I right? Have to have it. Slide. Number 7, ban ballot harvesting. Which, of course, we banned ballot harvesting, but is it enforced? Governor DeSantis in Florida, Steve, had to go the extra mile and turn ballot harvesting by signing a bill into a felony. In case you don't know what ballot harvesting is, it's the secret sauce for amping up mail ballot turnout, particularly for candidates who cannot win, like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And that doesn't have to be either of them. It can be anybody, like Karen Taylor Robeson in Arizona, who has 575 followers on Truth Social and almost knocked off the biggest rock star of this election cycle in Arizona. The election fraud problem is much bigger than you think. The ballot harvesting. Slide. Mules in Wisconsin trafficked 7% of all mail ballots in that state. Recently, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that unsupervised drop boxes were not only illegal, but that they were illegal at the time of the 2020 election, which means that any legitimate governing body would convene immediately to strike that fraudulent election from the books. That's a huge deal. So I would also put drop boxes underneath this step for ballot harvesting. So if you've heard of them, I think a homework assignment for you guys would be to find out if there were any unauthorized drop boxes that were around this county, or definitely in Harris County. I guarantee you there are there. Ballot harvesting has to go. Slide. Number 8, Election Day is a holiday. Now, some people wouldn't like this because it's not a per se conservative solution. So Ben Shapiro would probably hate this. This is another wasteful government holiday. But my comeback to that would be, how many times have you been to a post office to go mail a package on a Tuesday or Thursday, and you go tug on the door, and it's not going anywhere. And you're like, well, I can't mail my package. And you look down at my phone, and you're like, it's Bill Smith Day. Well, great, it's Bill Smith Day, so the post office is closed. We have enough holidays already. But in the Constitution, we prescribe the day that we vote in our federal elections, and it's called Election Day. So why are we not protecting our election day with a legitimate holiday? That way, we're going to get around the need for mail-in ballots and early voting, and if we have the smaller precincts of 1,200 or fewer, we can push for one day, one vote. You know, like it used to happen. That's such a radical idea. Now, this is going to require people with the money to get on the airwaves or get in a billboard campaign, because this will 100% resonate with the populist right, with the populist left, with the king of the hill tax cut Republican, with the union man Democrat. The only people that won't like it are the corrupt political class that know that because of the lack of mail-in ballots and early voting, which will no longer be necessary, they won't have a job. This is probably one of the most essential points that we can come up with. Slide. Number 9, new reporting requirements for transparency. Slide. I call these the Raffensperger rules, named after this human weasel that poses as the Georgia Secretary of State, presided over a corrupt presidential election, 2 corrupt Senate runoffs, and his own corrupt primary. What does this mean? Transparency is actually the problem we have in this country. Even though most of us that care about elections were called to this front because of the loss of a beloved and effective president, the national crisis is truly that 60% of the country doesn't trust the system of elections anymore. It doesn't matter if you're looking at Rasmussen or if you're looking at CNN. CNN will still show a majority of people that don't trust elections because the Bernie supporters don't trust elections. Their guy was ripped off. Now, what does it mean? The few mail-in ballots that we allow at the door, those are going to be back by 5 p.m. the day before the election, or they won't be counted. No more of the Alaska rules where you can request a mail-in ballot at 5 p.m. the day before election and have a week to get it in. Imagine being back in college. Hey, you've got a term paper due on May the 10th, but it's not due until June the 10th. That's our elections these days. And then we're going to count those first, and then we're going to have a hard count from every precinct, 1,200 or fewer, of how many ballots will be totaled, which will be binding. And then we will have a certain timeline in which to count those beautiful paper ballots by hand. Personally, if it takes a few days, I don't care. I waited 4 days for Pennsylvania to give me a third world election result with the use of electronic voting systems. This has to happen because if we don't have the transparency, we're going to continue to have the crisis of lack of confidence in elections. And finally, the one that we will never have to butt heads over, slide, heavy prison sentences for all who commit election fraud. Jennifer, I don't know why my computer keeps on auto-correcting firing squad to prison sentences, but here we are. We can't have a two-tiered system of justice in anything, not just elections, but any issue. Look at what the government does. They weaponize the IRS and other agencies to target their political adversaries. They refuse to police themselves when found to be corrupt. Delaware County, Pennsylvania was the last county in the state to certify its results. We have on tape elections officials laughing about destroying election results, about destroying materials, laughing about the conduct for the elections. Not 5 minutes will be spent in jail by any of them. This is something that we absolutely have to have as a federal statute if we're going to have free and fair elections in this country again. Slide. And in conclusion, the 2020 election, slide, we're on the conclusion, there we go. The 2020 election is the new precedent. There are definitely 81 million Biden ballots out there. The question is how many of them were cast by legal voters that voted one time, that voted by legal methods. That's the big question. That's the big intelligence gap. But in 2020, California's election processes were exported to the entire country. The ballot trafficking, the drop boxes, the corrupt voting systems, and certainly the filthy voter rolls. You know that there's a selective audit that's going to happen after the 2022 midterms here in Texas. It's not designed to overturn the election. But the Texas State Legislature, one of the things that they did manage to do, although I'm extremely disappointed because they were supposed to do a full forensic audit in several counties last year around this time, they did appoint a new law that selects 4 counties to undergo an election audit for procedural and regulations. And one of them that got picked was Harris County. And they are absolutely apoplectic about the thought of this audit because they're going to look at those 250,000 new registered voters per year, and we're going to find out just how many of those are actually real. But the 2020 election is the new precedent. You can now expect the Democrats to throw out 5.25 million votes to start with here in Texas when they were at a baseline of about 4 million for 2020. So that's going to stay unless people start pulling this stuff off the books that allow this to happen. Harris County, where there are drive-through voting lanes, Bexar County, all throughout the state, you have people cutting corners and taking shortcuts, mail-in voting, ballot harvesting. That's what is corrupting states. That's what flipped Georgia. In fact, Ken Paxton ought to be thanked because he's the one that got the signature match on the mail-in ballots that kept us from becoming Georgia in 2020. Yes. Number 2. The primaries are also a major concern. Jameson Ellis ran for Congress here in Texas. He's down in the back over there if you want to talk to him about his election experience. Jameson, raise your hand. Georgia, Brian Kemp won with 74% of the vote. He beat Trump's endorsed pick by more than 50 points. I don't know that I would ever expect Donald J. Trump to endorse somebody he would lose by 50 points, with polling showing him at 50% and going down into the election. Candace Taylor also ran for governor in Georgia, had 60,000 adult volunteers, but got 41,000 votes. Interesting. You don't have to be a math guy to understand that. Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, who was endorsed by Donald Trump, won on the benefit of mail ballots counted for multiple weeks. So much so that Donald Trump had to chime in about his endorsed pick benefiting from Pennsylvania's corrupt election system. a bit of a catch-22. The primaries are a serious problem. And it furthers the lack of trust people have in the system, because how do we get rid of the people that destroyed and corrupted this country if we don't have the mechanism to even get them out of their seats? Yeah. Usually, Republican midterms are bloodbaths because they're full of populist insurgents that knock off the rhinos. The rhinos are using these trips to ensure their own primary victories. And that's probably why you don't have much election activity in these red states. Number 3, I spent the first half of the presentation complaining about Texas's state of elections. Then I spent the back half showing you solutions. CCDF's about a lot. Jennifer works hard for this county. And so we do more than just elections. We do all kinds of stuff. And there's been a number of victories that Steve is going to share with you. Steve is one of the best leaders I've ever run across in my entire career in the military or in business. So what he has to say really matters. What the organization here is doing matters. And we have a lot of organizations out there. One of the problems with this conservative movement, so-called conservative movement, is there's too many irons that are in the fire and not enough consolidation of effort. This is an organization I'm absolutely thrilled and proud to walk alongside and work with, and I'm asking you to focus about what we want this future to be. He told me when I first met him, well, what do you think is going to happen in 2022? And I said, well, I think the Republicans will probably win both chambers, but what does it matter if they're rhinos? And he said, well, my plan doesn't go through 2022, it goes through 2072. So a multi-generational plan to stop this garbage that is destroying this country, to turn over a future to your kids and grandkids that you're actually proud of. That's what we need to do. So I'm going to ask you to prayerfully consider supporting Jennifer, supporting the Montgomery County CCDF. I'm very thankful that you invited me. And on my last slide, if you want to be in touch with me, especially about election stuff, my email's at the top, the Proton mail address. I'm pretty good about getting back with you as long as you don't send 20-paragraph emails. If you want to follow me, True Social, Telegram are my 2 biggest accounts, @Seth Keshel. I have a Substack, skeshel.substack.com. If you want to support my work, I do a lot of deep dives on that. And when I travel with Dr. Douglas Frank, I always like to point out that Michael and Bella employs Dr. Frank, but he loves me the most because I have the best promo code on mypillow.com, I should say. So, with that said, I would like to introduce somebody who's become a friend of mine and a trusted mentor and one of the best leaders I've met in all my 37 years. This is Mr. Steve Maxwell.